Hi, this is Greg. Look for my book, The Agile Brand, on Amazon or on my website at theagile.world. Welcome to the Agile World podcast. This is Greg Kihlstrom. In the next couple episodes, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Agile and Agile methodology. The purpose of this podcast really isn't to go into depth about Agile methodology. I approach it really more from a branding, marketing perspective than its original roots in manufacturing and technology, but I thought it'd be useful to go through at least some background for those a little bit less familiar. In order to talk about Agile, we really need to talk about what preceded it, which is what's referred to in a few different ways. One is waterfall, which is also related to something called software development lifecycle, or SDLC. But essentially, it's this idea that there's a process to make something. It really could be anything. It could be making a rocket. It could be writing software, pretty much anything you can imagine. But this process involves a series of steps, and those steps need to be done in a certain order. And if you need to make a change when you're a few steps into the process, it can be incredibly disruptive. So there's some good things about this process and some not so good ones. But the reason it originated, and I'll talk about it in terms of software in particular, I'm a little more familiar with that than manufacturing. But back in the day when computers were the size of rooms, if not buildings, software needed to be written in a very particular way. You only had a few minutes of time to really, or you had to block off minutes, I guess, a better way of saying, to use a computer in the first place. So you had this time period where you could use it. This huge hulking computer taking up some room somewhere was operated by punch cards. So punch cards are not very forgiving. So if you make a mistake, you have to go basically wait back in line, get in queue, and wait in line to use this computer again for a period of time. And so everything needed to be planned out really, really well. Or else, again, it takes a whole lot of time. Mistakes are made. You have to go back to the beginning of the process. So this idea of a software development lifecycle, or this waterfall process where one thing follows the other, became really important because you had to plan everything to a T before you really ever got started. So again, if you plan everything, if you program the computer, make a mistake, then you literally start over. So this becomes really useful when time is limited, when computing power is limited, and all of those factors are so. But as computers shrink, as everyone has one, as everyone is basically holding a supercomputer if they own a smartphone, some of those considerations don't mean so much anymore. And so in the programming world and in the software programming world, this idea of Agile was eventually born. It kind of took a few iterations over time, but eventually became, in about 2001, became this term known as Agile. And so, as you would imagine, Agile means nimble, able to be changed, so on and so forth. This term Agile really took off with the publication of what was called the Agile Manifesto. And so, in the software world, Agile made a lot of sense because, again, computing power, computing time, none of those things really became issues when you were writing software anymore. There were certainly many other considerations, but the idea that you could make mistakes and redo them very quickly, if not almost instantly, all of a sudden changed the way that we thought about things. It doesn't mean that you don't need good requirements at the beginning. You still need business requirements before you start a project, but it means we don't always know how we're going to get to the end goal. We know what the end goal is, but we don't really necessarily know all of the steps that we're going to take to get there. And that's okay. And I think the fact that is okay was a major change in the way that people did things. So I'm going to talk a little bit more over the next few episodes about applying this whole idea of agility and this ability to sometimes fail, sometimes modify things, sometimes change things very quickly, how that applies to both marketing as well as branding. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please rate the show on iTunes or contact me through my website at theagile.world. You can find my books, The Agile Brand and The Agile Web, on Amazon and on my website at theagile.world.